This is the second video for pipe plans. I want to go over the different elements that you will see in a pipe plan. Some items that you will see have different shapes here. You see these here. We'll see a rectangular object here. I see two rectangles here. Okay, so I think that's all for right now. So these larger items that you might see, these are equipment. Equipment is going to be displayed larger. We'll have different symbols for them or different shapes that make them look a little bit like the actual object. When we're trying to define locations, we always find a center line. Just like in single line pipelines, the center axis or the center line is really important. And once you have located that center line, then the name of the equipment will be listed here. So this circular shape is the secondary fiber, the high density storage tank. Now you will get questions as to what kind of equipment or where's the pump. You know, every time we talk about equipment, we have to look for the label that gives us that piece of equipment. Okay, in here we don't have a center line. There is an arrowhead right here that is pointing to it. Okay, so here these look the same, and I look for a center line. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. I look for the center line. The center line is right here for all of these. Okay, and see, it has a CL right here. CL, monorails and screens are all lined up. The secondary center line is here. So I don't see a name that is really close to each one of these except for this last one. This last one is pointing to the object right here, and it tells us that that's the long fiber primary screen. They didn't have enough room to put that description here, so what they did is they extended that, and that information is given to us way out here. So like I told you before, just follow the center lines. It's really important for you to be able to locate those labels for each one of these screens here. By the way, since I'm already here, notice this has a cloud around it. That's a revision cloud. That just means that something has changed, or maybe there was an error in the drawing. Typically with these, I think that elements here have changed or they have replaced some of them in the cloud. So that revision could have been made on the drawing itself or fittings around this area here. Here it gives us a nominal floor elevation for these screens. I also want to point out the pump right here. You will have to locate it for your assignment. So now let's look at some of the circular shapes here. These circular shapes are instruments. You see that there's several of them here. So notice that instruments have 2 letters over some numbers. These numbers is what we call loop number. So we have this one here and this one here that have the same loop number. That means that this one interacts with this one and they work off of each other. FE is a flow valve, FE is a flow element. And so for you to know where that is, there is a chart that you can find it easily online that lets you know what each one of these represents. I have included that in your folder. It's this one here. That table, for the first letter, we have these 2 columns here, and then for the second letter, we have these 2 columns. So if you have FE, we're going to look for F is flow, okay, and then E, the second column, is sensor or primary element. So it's a flow element or flow sensor. If you have FV, that would be a flow, and then V for the second letter, it's a valve, so that would be a flow valve. Let's see, you have a PDV. Let's look at that one. P is pressure, D is deviation, Okay, not this one because this is for first letter and we're looking at second letter. So pressure deviation valve. Okay, pressure deviation valve. All right, so I also wanted to point out this right here, that's a reducer. And then you may have other symbols around here, and you will have things that are pointing to it. So this one here, that's a flow element for that. You may have something like this. That's an insulation symbol for that pipe. So that pipe is insulated. Okay, now let's talk about the pipe itself. These are the lines for pipe. It's single line drawings. Notice that each one of them gives us the direction of flow. And we will also notice that some of the lines have these little squigglies. That just means that the lines continue, but they didn't draw it, mainly because there was something else that was coming from it that would interfere. Like this pipeline is right below this one. These pipelines are identified by these slotted symbols here. The first number here is the actual pipe number. This is the service, and in here we have some of these pipelines and in circular shapes with section lines. Remember what those represent, that is coming straight towards us. If you see a circle that is like this interrupted by a line, then that means that that pipe at this point goes down. Some of those are not circles but elliptical shapes, so that means that this one here is coming from a higher area. It goes down at a 45-degree angle, typically 45 degrees, and then it comes down here and then continues that way. Some of these will have a different angle, like this one. That just means that it has been angled off. I do want to point out that some of the circular and elliptical shapes are going to be displayed smaller, and that's because the pipeline is smaller. So the bigger the circle, the bigger the pipe it is. In here, notice that this reducer here is a 14/8 reducer, so that means that this part of that pipeline is 14, and then this side of that pipe is 8. One last thing that I do want to point out, one of the first few questions that you will have is asking how many sections are cut in this drawing. Sections are going to be identified by cutting plane lines. Okay, here's one, this W here. Notice that we have arrowheads. See how this is shaping up to look like a cutting plane line? So this is section WW. And then the number that is underneath that in parentheses, that is the drawing number for that section. There are several of these sections throughout this pipe plan, and you need to look for them. There's 11 in total.